all for joining me today. We are finally ready to get started. I don't know about you, but I know buying my yarn ahead of time, I'm ready to go. So I don't know how the wait was for you between getting started and now, but I've been itching to get my hands crocheting. Today what we're going to be working on is part of the back. We're just going to do part of the back. And what's great is that it kind of like eases you in to doing the sweater. So we're going to be talking about the stitch pattern, which you'll see is really fun. Single crochets, double crochets, chains, all the good stuff. We're going to be looking at our stitch diagram quite a lot. So if you don't have any idea what a stitch diagram is, don't worry. Come join me for the fun. And we're going to be talking about gauge because that's pretty darn important as well. So we have a lot to cover and you have a lot of crocheting, so let's get right to it. So come join me down at my table. Right in front of us, I have our stitch diagram. The stitch diagram is basically, think of it as like your little roadmap to what we're going to be doing. Along the side, it tells you all of the symbols that you're going to be using in the stitch diagram. So this is always a great little key to see, okay, do I know what those things mean? Obviously, chains, single crochets, double crochets, those are pretty basic, right? The ones that I like to kind of highlight and go, oh, what is that? Are things that you don't know. And so, or you may not be familiar with, haven't done in a while. So the foundation single crochet and the stacked double crochet might be new to you. These are type of things that you are going to find in your special stitches, that section in the pattern. That's kind of like really nice to know, like, ooh, these are in special stitches. When you don't see things listed in special stitches, which means like every part of what you're doing. What's nice about for us, so if you go to marleybird.com, we have a special section that goes through each one of the more common stitches. Not only is it written out, there'll be video tutorials for anything that you need. So anything need a reminder on, it's at marleybird.com. For us, what we are going to be doing is we're going to be working our back. So our back is basically a repeat of the stitches all the way across. Every size will have a different amount of foundation single crochets that you need to do. Working from there, then you're going to repeat instructions over and over again to the amount of rows that you need to do for this section. All right, so let's look and talk a little bit about a repeat and what that is. So without having any crochet knowledge or anything, you can kind of see when you're looking at this is that you can kind of see that there is these boxes that have like holes in them, or you can call them chain spaces. And they kind of repeat throughout. And in between there, you have like a solid section of stitches throughout. If you do a holy section, a box section, plus a solid section, this whole thing is one stitch repeat. And the only reason I call this out right now is that when you are looking at your work, it's nice to know like what is being repeated over and over and what should I have. So because each size will repeat a different number. So it's kind of nice to have in your brain, okay, I know that I'm going to need to have like a solid section and a section with holes and, over and over, and they alternate. Like they don't stack on top of each other. They alternate. It's always nice to know those type of things like a roadmap. It's just you're pulling out the information that really, really helps you. How you read the diagram is you start at the bottom and you work your way up. So we're going to start on with our setup, which is foundation single crochets, and then we will work our way up. So I think the easiest thing for us to do is just to do it one by one and work our way up and across. So we're going to start out with foundation single crochets. If you've never done a foundation single crochet before, I welcome you to go grab a couple stitch markers because they may help you along the way of what we're doing. Otherwise, grab your yarn, grab your hook, and we're going to get started. In the pattern, it'll tell you how many foundation single crochets to do for us, because I'm only going to do a small little bit of this. I'm not going to do a whole size for you, otherwise you'll be very bored watching me crochet. I'm only going to do what the stitch diagram has here. So I'm only going to do 31 because every repeat is made up of 10 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Plus an extra one at the end. So I'm only going to do 31 to get us started. You need to do as many it is for your size. There's lots of different ways to start a foundation single crochet. This is how I do it. You can do it any way you want to do it. What I do is I start with a slip knot on my hook and I chain 2. I insert my hook into the first chain I made. So not this one that's next to my hook, but this one down here. So you think of it as either the second one from your hook or the very first one you made. I'm going to insert my hook anywhere in that chain. I'm going to yarn over, pull up a loop. So I have 2 loops on my hook. Now I'm going to yarn over and just pull through 1. That is essentially making a chain. I'm going to go ahead and grab a stitch marker and put my stitch marker in the stitch I just made. And then I'm going to yarn over, pull through 2. That completed the single crochet. Now we're going to make another one. So this is 1 foundation single crochet. I'm going to insert my hook where my stitch marker is. So I'm inserting my hook into the same place as my stitch marker, pulling up a loop. I don't need that anymore. I'm going to take it off. Then I'm going to yarn over, pull through 1, put back in your stitch marker. Yarn over, pull through 2. So pulling through 1 created a chain. Pulling through 2 created my foundation single crochet. Okay, again, insert your hook into where the stitch marker is, pull up a loop, take it out because it's done its job, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. Now if you don't need that stitch marker, where you're inserting your hook is if you look at your stitch, the loops that are closest to your hook. So all of these loops here, that's going to be the top of your single crochet. All of these loops here, they're the base of your stitch. So you're always inserting your hook at the base of the stitch when you do these foundation stitches. So I'm inserting my hook in the base of the stitch. I like to make sure that I'm going through 2 strands. You can see that there's 2 strands on my hook. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Then I go ahead and yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. So again, inserting my hook into the base of the stitch. I got 2 strands there, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. That made the single crochet. Again, inserting my hook into the base of the stitch, pulling up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2, and again. So you just keep repeating those 2 steps, inserting into the base, pulling up a loop, yarning over, pulling through 1, yarning over, pulling through 2. And you repeat that over and over until you have the amount of stitches that you need. And again, when you're holding it, these are the stitches that you're going into. So you count from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We obviously have a lot to go. Feel free to keep using the stitch marker method, meaning when you get to here, you yarn over, pull through 1, plop your stitch marker in there. If it helps you see where you're going, there's nothing wrong with it. You can get in a rhythm with your stitch marker and move it as you do it. There's nothing wrong with that method of using their stitch markers. That's why they made stitch markers. They're here to help us if it helps you. If it just feels like it's in the way, then don't use it. It's not something that's necessary. All right. I'm going to keep working on making our foundation single crochets while we look at their next row. So you can see every other row is a different color as you go up. And that's to show you that you are on a different row. There is also numbers that show you when you start a new row each time. So row 1, row 2, row 3, and they go back and forth because we'll be making rows. So we're going to be turning our rows. If you were going in the round, it would have all of the numbers on the same side. So when you're working, there's so much to see here, right? This is just so much. There's nothing wrong with taking anything that can block off what you don't need to know right now, right? So you don't need to know anything above there because we haven't gotten to there yet. So you don't need to worry about any of that information. So those are always nice. Essentially, what you do is you do what you see. So the very first thing that we see is a chain because we can use our little symbol crochet over here. A little oval is a chain because think about making a chain. You're pulling an oval through an oval through an oval. That's why it's a little circle. The very next stitch that we see is a single crochet. Perfect, so it would be the single crochet in the next one. And this is how you read it across. Then it tells you to chain 2. There's nothing that's going into these 2 stitches, so you don't put anything in them. And then it has a tall stitch. In our case, that's a double crochet. So then you put a double crochet in the next 5. And that's how you read these as you go across. They're really nice to give you a really clear key of what's going on. What's also nice is because of, it's hard sometimes to read all of those written instructions. It can be nice to use your stitch diagram to kind of keep track of what the words are telling you, because with both of them together, they can give you a clear idea of what's going on. All right, let's see how many I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. All right, well, 21 is fine. We'll just that'll be a big enough swatch for us. All right. So to do row 1, all I'm going to do is do what I see. So chain 1 is the first thing I see. I will chain 1. We had been working essentially like making like a long snake. Turn it over so now it is on the rows. You will be working on, this will be on its wrong side. If you see like all of these little bumps, you're on the right side. If you see what looks like a line of V's, that's the right side. So you want to be working on the opposite side. So we'll be working on this side. The first thing it is a single crochet in the first stitch. So this right here is our first stitch. I just insert my hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. The next was a chain. So I go 1, 2 chains, skip 2 stitches, and then do a double crochet in the next 5. So a double crochet is where you yarn over, insert your hook into a stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and again. So when we're done, we have 5 double crochets in a row. Then the stitch diagram shows us to chain 2, skip 1 2 stitches, and do a single crochet in the next single crochet. So that work right there is the exact same as our work right here. So single crochet, chain 2, 5 double crochets, chain 2, single crochet. So that work here. And the other thing with your stitch diagram is it mimics it, right? So this grows high, goes over, goes down. So it's the same thing with my crochet work. I repeat these directions across because you can look at your stitch diagram and it shows that it's going to repeat across, and I end with a single crochet in the last stitch. So we'll just finish this row, chain 2, skip 2, double crochet in the next 5. 1 2 3 4 5. With my last 3 stitches, I chain 2, skip those 2 double crochets, single crochet in the last single crochet. And I've completed the row. All right, so now we move up to row 2. Row 2 starts with another special stitch, with this a stacked double crochet. Then we have a chain 2, single crochet in each one of the doubles, chain 2, double crochet in the single, and we repeat across. We love using stacked double crochets here at Marley Bird. If you are not a fan of what I'm going to show you, feel free to just chain 3. Instead, it kind of replaces that turning chain to get tall. What you do to do a stacked double crochet is you turn your work over. You're not going to chain anything. You're going to insert your hook into the very first stitch and pull up a loop. So you have 2 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over and pull through those 2. Now you're going to insert your hook between the 2 strands, yarn over, pull up a loop, then yarn over, pull through those 2. So that is essentially like thinking of stacking 2 single crochets on top of each other. That is what your stacked double crochet is. It just gives you a more thicker, solid stitch when you want to start a row with a double crochet. Now, again, if this was confusing, that's okay. Just do a chain 3 instead. Moving forward, we're going to chain 2. Skip the chain 2 space and do a single crochet in the next 5 double crochets. So insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. So single crochet in each double crochet across. Chain 2, skip the chain 2 space, double crochet into the next single crochet, chain 2, single crochet in the next 5 doubles. Chain 2, single crochet, a double crochet in the last single crochet. All right, here's our end of row 2. So basically what happens is our odd rows are going to kind of make these humps, and then our even rows even it all out. Like this is now a nice square. Moving on to row 3. We turn our work, take a look at the pattern, and it shows us that we will do a stacked double crochet in the first double crochet. Then we're going to be putting 2 double crochets in our chain 2 spaces. Chain 2, skip 2, single crochet, chain 2, skip 2, and then we repeat the whole 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space, a double crochet in the double crochet, and then 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space. So you start to repeat exactly what we're doing. We end with 3 double crochets. All right, so do another stacked double crochet. I've turned my work. Insert my hook into the first double crochet, pulled up a loop. Yarn over, pull through 2. Insert my hook between the 2 vertical strands, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. So I did a stacked double crochet to start. Again, you could just chain 3 if you'd prefer. Now we're going to do 2 double crochets in the next chain space. Chain 2, skip 2, single crochet in the next single crochet, chain 2, skip these 2, 2 double crochets in the next chain 2 space. And I'm going around the space. I'm going in the hole. Double crochet in the next double crochet, 2 double crochets in the next chain 2 space. I'm not going into those stitches. I'm going around the stitches into the hole. And you can see what it does is make a little window with 4 little petals, essentially. So you'll have these solid sections, and eventually you have these little petals that you can see really well that are made up of the chain 2 spaces. So finish this off, chain 2, skip 2, single crochet in the next single crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochets in the next chain 2 space, and then a double crochet in the last stitch. These stacked double crochets work just like a regular double crochet, which is really nice. You can see the stacked double crochet here. Going into it at the end is really easy. Okay, so that was the end of row 3. You can see that it kind of has the little mountains. And now we move to row 4. So row 4, just like before, is going to even everything out. So we look at row 4. We're going to start with a chain 1. And then again, it's single crochets in all the doubles, chain 2 over the chain 2s, a double crochet in the single crochet. It is the same stitches that we did down here. It's just offset. So these repeat. It's just their ending and beginnings are slightly different so that these holes will offset instead of stack up. That's the main thing that they're doing different here. All right, so let's do row 4, chain 1, flip it over, single crochet in the next 3 double crochets, chain 2, double crochet in the next single crochet, chain 2, skip the chain 2 space, and then single crochet in the next double crochets, 1 in each. We get to the end, we have a single crochet in each one of these double crochets. And now row 4 is done. So row 5 will just set us up again with, it's the same as this, it's just done up here. And instead of going, into each one of these stitches, we're going into these chain 2 spaces. So that is all you need to know for this stitch diagram. There's nothing new in anything that is happening here. So for your back, you're going to do as many foundation single crochets as you need and then work your way up. Now, the one thing we haven't talked about is gauge. So what I want you to do is go ahead and get enough that we can measure some gauge and then we can work together. So go ahead and keep crocheting so you have enough that we can measure both our stitch gauge and our row gauge. So you're going to need a pretty good amount. If you wanted to crochet exactly this would be a perfect amount, enough so that you have enough to measure. If you want to use your actual sweater, you're going to need to be crocheting at least 12 rows just so you get a good section, because it tends to be the bottom can sometimes wing out before you really get your tension working, so you don't really want to measure the beginning part of it. So go ahead and crochet a bit for me and then meet me back here and we'll talk about gauge. All right, now you should have a little something crocheted. Whether you were working from just a swatch or you're working on your back panel, you have something to measure, because now is everybody's favorite time and to talk about gauge. I'm going to use our stitch diagram real quick and talk about the gauge and what is listed on the pattern. Okay, remember how I was talking about the stitch repeat? The gauge for this sweater is 2 stitch repeats, 2 stitch repeats equals 5 3/4 inches. So almost 6 inches, not quite 6 inches. The way you can look at it is, like I was saying, one open section, one solid section, one open section, one solid section. What I find the easiest when it comes to measuring is I will measure, I'm going to do it in a different color. I will measure from a double crochet to a double crochet, like in the middle of the open section. I find measuring here just a lot easier to do. But it's the same. It's the same length. It doesn't really matter where you measure from. I just find that like measuring from these double crochets to make it the easiest when I'm measuring. All right, that's the stitch repeat, but you also have a row count. So 8 rows equals 4 inches. It doesn't really matter what 8 rows that you're choosing. So just start anywhere. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 rows equals 4 inches. These are the numbers. These are the magical numbers. So 4 inches and 5 3/4 is what you want to get. Why you want to get that? We go back to our stitch diagram. It's how all of these numbers are calculated. It's done on getting this gauge. So let's look at our swatches. So I'm working on an extra small version here in my, very pretty macchiato cake using this fun solitude. I mean, can't think of a more perfect name for all this gray color, but I'm really loving this. So, like I said, it's the best way to measure is from one of these double crochets to double crochets, because they're easy to see. You can see where these holes are, right? Like these are easy to find no matter what your yarn looks like. You can see when you like lift it up, lift it down. Those are really what your eye is drawn to. So when I'm measuring, I'm going to measure, put my measuring tape on the center of one of those double crochets. So I have the center, the 0 here, and I'm measuring all the way across. Here is, so 1, 2, and you can see I get 5 3/4. You can see where the 6 is, 5 3/4. That is the right gauge, obviously. I wrote the pattern. I shouldn't laugh too hard. Sometimes your gauge does change. It really, like, if you're watching a movie and you're like super into it, you could get tighter. Or if you like are getting tired at night, you could get looser. Your gauge does change. So even though I'm giggling at myself, it can change. It can change within your project too. So like I was saying, I don't like to measure right down here because sometimes this can be wider or tighter. It's never, I always like to measure kind of right in the middle of my project. Now let's check row. So we want 8 rows, and in this case, this is kind of hard to see where your rows are. So I will use, knowing that I have a solid, a wholly section, a solid, and then, more lace. So I need 1, 2, 3, 4, or think of like 2 solid sections and 2 lace sections, and those should add up to 4 inches. So I will put my tape measure at the top. And so it's easy to measure from the start of this solid section to the start of that solid section should be 4 inches. So that's how you measure your gauge. In most cases, when it comes to garments, they want this to be a blocked gauge. So if my project is a little bit wonky, I will lay it out and kind of block it by hand. But I won't lie, this sweater has so much extra ease in it. I don't want you to stress out if you're not getting the exact gauge on the sweater. I do want to say, make sure you're getting the correct gauge on other projects, especially, like other projects that we could have done. But this one in particular, you can be a little bit off on your gauge. I normally wouldn't say that, but in this one, you can be a little bit off. Let me show you. So one of the yarns that we were using was Blossom Cake, right? And I was doing our little swatch out of that. So the gauge I get for here, so I don't have to go across because I made this tiny. But if this square is 2 stitch repeats across, you can see 1, 2, and it's measuring out to be 5.5 inches. Okay, so there's 2 things I want you to think about here. If you are measuring, again, I want your swatch to be bigger. If you're doing a swatch versus doing your back, I want your swatch to be 1 more bigger. I want it to be at least 3 across bigger, like it's shown in the stitch pattern. But let's say you're measuring across and you get 5.5. You have 2 options here. And specifically, if you're using the Blossom Cake, what I would do is that's a little small. It's 5.5 and I want it to be 5 3/4. So there's 2 options. One, the first one was, which I would try, is I was using a J hook for this. You might consider going up a hook size and go to a K. Instead of using a J, go to a K and then measure your swatch to see what it is. That, I think, is a really good option for this because, so we're close. We're really close on, because it's a 1/4 of an inch difference. It's a 1/4 of an inch. I want to show you why that matters on our sweater, why that in a second here. We're a 1/4 of an inch off. I definitely think going up a K would get it. But more importantly, our row gauge. So remember, we needed wholly section, solid, wholly section, solid. So if we measure down on these guys, we're looking at 3.5 inches. So that's a whole 1/2 inches shorter than what I was calling for. So that's really going to make a difference. In the end, you're going to have a shorter sweater. That means that your arms are, that means not your arms, because our arms are not based on here, but our neck is going to be shorter. Everything's going to be shorter and squatter because it starts to affect things. So for this, I would definitely go up for a K. For me, to use the Blossom Cake. Now, it's going to work just fine if you go up 1 is what I would recommend. But option 2 is basically saying, okay, let's say you really like the way that this is draping. I'm going to tell you I do not like the way this is draping. It needs to go up to a K. This is more how I want it to drape. It's much more flexible and loose, and this is more dense. It looks beautiful, don't get me wrong. This is what I would want if I was making like a blanket. Like it's a beautiful, but it's not quite enough flowy for me for a sweater. This is really comfy and cozy. But let's say, for instance, a hypothetical, 3.5, remember this was 5.5 across. Let's say that you're like, I like the look, whatever yarn you're using, I like the look. Well, let's see what it does to our schematic. Because remember, it's going to change both the width and it's going to change the neckline. So let's say that we are doing the 3x, 4x, right? Let's say we're doing the 3x, 4x. I know that the 3x, 4x all the way across, so all the way across is 12 stitch repeats. So 2 stitch repeats was supposed to be 5 3/4, but oops, we made it 5.5. Well, let's find out what our bust circumference is going to be. Like, what's the difference? Like, what if I just went with it? It's a little bit smaller. It's 1/4 inch. How much of a difference can it be? Let's see. So all of it's going to be is 6 times 5.5. Because 12 divided by 2 is 6. So that's 5.5 times 6. So that's going to be 33 inches across our bust, or you can think of it as 66 inches all the way around. Well, it was designed for 34.5. So it will end up being 34.5 is 69. So it's going to end up being 3 inches smaller. If we go with 5.5, which is just 1/4 inch smaller, it ends up being 3 inches smaller around the bust. That may be fine for you, I don't know, or it may not. Like, that is something you have to determine. Now, when it comes to the neckline for the 3x, 4x is 4 stitch repeats across, which is the 11.5. So now it would be 11 inches because it's 5.5, because, we have a difference. So that would be 1/2 inch smaller in your neckline, which, let's be honest, that's okay. That's not that bad. But more than anything, I just want you to think about how it ripples. Right? So 1/4 inch difference will make it smaller. When you're going to block your sweater, you're not going to have this schematic size. But it's not that bad, right? 1/4 inch, if you're a little tighter, that's not that terrible. It's going to be a little bit smaller, but that's okay. And it's the same way if you think of it as going bigger. If your neckline is a little bigger, that might be okay. Now you wouldn't want it to be like, you want it within reason, because the neckline is where you're going to see everything. This sweater is so oversized, you're not really going to even notice the difference between the 3 inches difference. But let's say our neckline goes from the 11.5 to 10, you'll notice that. A whole 1.5 inch difference, you would notice. If you can keep your differences in your neckline to be 1/2 inch plus or minus, you're gonna be fine. So with this sweater only, if your gauge is a little bit narrower or a little bit wider, and I mean minuscule, like itty bitty, you're going to be okay, just because it's built in because of the nature of the boxy oversized sweater. That would not be the case if you're making a sweater that has no ease, meaning, remember, it's up against your body. You will definitely, it won't fit. It'll be the wrong size. Now, remember with this, because my row gauge is so far off, like that is going to make it much shorter. So I said it was 3.5 instead of 4 inches. So if we play that game, for this is our length, and we were doing the 3x, which is 24. It should be 24 inches. But instead, it's going to end up being 21 inches. So 3 inches, think of that, 3 inches in your length. That doesn't sound great. The width sounded okay, but oh boy, over time it really changes. That would definitely be something you need to pay attention to and think about. Luckily, we are going to talk more about that next time. Because I wouldn't just leave you there. And that's the whole thing with this sweater, is little bit by little bit learning these sneaky things to think about. Like, everybody worries about gauge and they stress out about it. Everybody does it. I do it. Everybody does it. But I like to rather look at it in a whole sense of what's going on, right? Like, what does that actually mean? And so 1/4 inch here and there in our sweater, because it's so big, it doesn't end up doing much when it comes to our width. But our row gauge, ooh, that was 1/2 inch off. That's going to make a difference. Luckily, if you need to choose one, choose it to be your rows to be off. We can make that work. And we are going to learn how to make it work next time in part 2. So right now, all you need to do is find your gauge. Find what you enjoy crocheting, what fabric, what fabric that you're working on. What does it feel good to you? What does it look good? Try to get close to my gauge and go with it. I'm, as you can see, very close. I just need a little bit more stitch repeats, and then I'm done for the day. So that's perfect. And with part 2, I will see you next time, and we have a little bit more to talk about. So till then, have fun crocheting. I'll see you soon.